Item number 1, evacuation procedure. A fire drill is not expected, so the alarm sounds. Please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather at the Yorkshire Bank opposite side of the road. Exit by the door which you enter the room by, or the fire exits which are clearly indicated by the standard fire exit sign. If you require any assistance to evacuate the building, please make yourself known to a member of the staff. Also, please make sure that your mobile phones are turned off or set to silent. And I'll invite everybody that the meeting or part of the meeting will be recorded for future broadcast, if anybody's willing to watch them. I know some do. Right, we have apologies. Wood Pomfret and Council Walmsley, is that right? Yeah. We also have Lynn Price's apology, unfortunately she can't make it today. Right, can I confirm the minutes of the panel held on the 6th of June?
Sorry, Joe, before you do, we do have some substitutes. We have Councillor Evans substituting.
Sorry, I can't say that. Yeah.
You said Councillor Lunkin
was supposed to be substitute before.
Yeah, he's not here yet.
My apologies.
Sorry,
Apologies all around. Apologies for the apologies. Can I sign the minutes as a true record? Yeah. Declarations of interest and party of work. If there's anything in the papers that's not there. Council Evans.
Obviously I'm just a substitute, so just refer members to my interests which are disclosed in the members' interests.
Councillor.
I'm Governor of Nuneaton School.
Okay. We all agree with that? Okay, thank you. We're coming to item number 5, public consultation. I don't believe there's a member of anybody willing to speak to the committee at the present moment. And with panels, if the panel will agree, can we take item number 9 first? Because Christine has got a family thing and she has to give a report and leave us. So it'd be far better, I think, for it to be held first. Everybody all right with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll take item number 9, page 54. Christine?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So, a report is on the formal complaints and freedom of information requests, and it's for the period April to July of this year. What's presented are formal complaints by service area, and the percentage responded to or acknowledged within 10 days, and then also the total number of freedom of information requests recorded by subject area, and the average days to respond. And then there's also a sample extract of FOIs over a 3-month period, detailing the type of information in question was asked. That was requested by this panel at the previous meeting. So formal complaints, during that period we received 319 that have been recorded, which is an average of 80 per month, and an average response rate of 93.7%, which compares last year, same period last year was 91.3%. So the table shows by service area, total received, and the number responded or acknowledged in 10 days. What I'd like to just point out, in the integrated performance report, which you'll be looking at later, where the complaints are also reported, for the quarter, the first quarter of this year. The difference between my report and that one is that my report actually details those that have either been responded to or that have been acknowledged in 10 days, whereas what's in the integrated performance report is only what's been responded to. Okay, so you've got slightly more information in this report. Whether the complaint, whether it's acknowledged or the complainant's been contacted or visited, I actually look at that on a monthly basis, and that's what's recorded and reported in this report. So that's the difference. Freedom of information request, there were 244 in that reporting period in April to July. That's an average of 61 per month, which is pretty much the same as last year. All requests are acknowledged automatically for freedom of information, and the average days to complete response was 14 days compared to 15 days. Okay. So again, the difference between this report and what you see in the integrated performance report, this is an average time to respond. What you've got in the performance report is where they've taken over 20 days to respond. So there's a difference between the two reports. Okay. The detail, which I'm not going to go through all of that detail, but you can see, if you actually see it, section 7, the extract, which has been anonymised, and I've tried to summarise what the request was about. The title tends to say it, but I've added some information to some of it, just to give you an idea of how varied they actually are. There are some where it's actually a theme, where if we actually publish them on the website, we could refer people who requested that. But actually they're so varied that even publishing, we'd have to look to see whether that same request was on the website, so it would take just as long. But that's just to give you an idea, as the panel requested, what sort of information we're asked for. And sometimes we're asked an awful lot of questions. Some people send questionnaires, research companies and students sometimes send a complete questionnaire.
Any questions from the panel? Councillor Condacor?
Yeah, these are only the first request or the first level of complaint. Is there any idea how many freedom of information requests people ask for an internal review, or how many of the complaints people are actually not happy with the complaint and then raise it up to the next level, the second level complaint?
I can report on escalated. I can give you that. I haven't actually got it here, but I can. These in this report, I haven't detailed how many are escalated. We probably, on average, get 3 or 4 in a month that get escalated to stage 2 and then responded to. So that's probably in this reporting period, roughly about 16, I should think, 16, 17.
Because it's quite useful, Chair, to know not just how quickly they go through, but actually when they go through, how many then actually come back again.
I can include that in another report. Yeah.
Councillor Elliott?
Thanks, Chair. Just wondered, is there a protocol for freedom of information? Because the one on page 58, about halfway down, any bin collection on Good Friday, doesn't sound like a legitimate freedom of information. So is there any council protocol that they're directed to when they come in?
We do get them. Sometimes we actually think it's more of a service request or it's a general inquiry. We would respond in kind, but we'd respond just the same to that sort of inquiry. So that one, probably, we didn't actually respond as a freedom of information, but we gave them the same information as we would if it was. There's nothing actually written anywhere that actually says.
Well, it's a legislative requirement,
Yeah.
so it sets out in the Freedom of Information Act what you do with them. And I should say, Chair, that there is nothing that requires it to say this is a Freedom of Information Act request. It can just be a written request to say, please provide me with the following information, and we're obliged to consider it under the terms of the Act accordingly. And in some cases, we then have to consider whether in fact it's FOI or EIR, because of course there is a subtle distinction between the two.
Any other members of the panel?
What does EIR stand for, sorry?
It's the Environmental Information Regulations, so any information that relates to the environment or related topics that could be construed as relating to the condition of the environment, the air, the water, the soil, or the built environment actually comes under EIR rather than FOI. And those regulations have slightly more subtle rules about how you deal with them. Same principle, but different reasons for providing information, and also in some cases different reasons for not providing information.
Okay.
Any other comments from the panel? The recommendation is to make feedback and comment. I believe Councillor Condicott made a good suggestion. We shall take that up for future reports, and thanks for the information that's put to us today. Thank you. Right, just a little bit of a change. Again, the request has been made for item number 7 to be presented as a second item for the panel, the monitoring of government maintenance contract. It's presented by David, and understand that the short presentation for the new contract for Glendale will not be shown because the site is not up and running just now, but it will be in the next couple of weeks.
I will be giving a short presentation, but not.
Okay. Right. David, if you wish to.
Thank you, Chair. In general overview, as the report sets out, we have experienced some operational difficulties during the spring and summer period, particularly related to grass cutting and also vegetation growth throughout certain sections of the Bedworth estate. This year has been a particularly warm and wet weather period, and that has had a major impact on grass growth and weeds in the borough. I've included the graph in the report, which I'm not sure if it is in colour or if you've just got it in black and white. It's not in colour. The graph itself relates to agricultural forage growth, which I accept is not what we're talking about. We're talking about amenity grass growth rather than that. We've included it because it serves to illustrate a contrast, if you like, between different growth rates over the preceding 3 seasons. It includes for the periods 17, 18 and 19. What it has shown is that for the 2019 season, whilst grass growth didn't initially peak as highly as it had in previous years, it also hasn't seen a significant drop-off. Normally we would expect to see grass drop-off during the early parts of July, and this year it's actually continued on at a fairly steady pace all the way through until as recently as the last couple of weeks in August. Officers have been working with our grounds maintenance contractor to try and address those issues. That has included additional resources which our contractors brought in, and a significant additional input of staff to try and bring those back up to standard. Where necessary, we have utilised a rectification system. For the period to the 21st of August, we had issued a total of 66 rectification notices, which contrasts with the 43 the previous year and 57 in 2017. And we issued 1 default notice during that period, which again contrasts with previous years, but I think illustrates that we've been working more closely with our contractor to deal with rectification notices at first point, rather than allowing them to escalate further. Monitoring scores for the formal areas cover the period from April to July, and combined across the grounds maintenance contract, The contractor's been scoring a total of 77.38% against a base requirement of 75. Customer satisfaction forms, we continue to send those out regularly. We send approximately 100 out every month. As you can see, however, the return rate is so small that they are statistically insignificant. It details in a bit more, in section 6, it details monitoring performance in a slightly more detailed manner. And section 7 lays out slightly more detail on where the rectifications have been issued and for what items. And that's followed by a breakdown of the periods in which they have been issued. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, David. Do you want to do a presentation now, Paul, or do you want to deal with that first?
Oh, I think I'll wait until
Okay.
after, because I think the two things are separate.
Okay.
If I may, Chair.
Any questions? Councillor Condicor?
Yeah, we've had quite a lot of issues at Cleveland Gardens, some of which have been down to them doing the paths at the same time. So one question is, does housing work with parks so that actually they tell you the paths work's going to happen so you can do your work before they start fencing it off and doing their works? And the second question on your performance monitoring, are the flats included in the informal monitoring, or are they not monitored at all? You know, the Cleveland Gardens and the wide avenues and the like.
Right. In terms of the works that our colleagues in housing have been undertaking on the Cleveland Gardens site, we were initially made aware that the works were taking place, but obviously the nature of them was such that we were unable to effectively access the site in order to undertake maintenance operations while the footway relaying was taking place. So we'd advised our contractor and we'd arranged with them so that we would return to the site as soon as was practicable in order to return the site to specification. In terms of the monitoring, monitoring of housing sites would fall within the formal part of the process rather than the informal sites. Informal sites tend to relate more to sites such as our countryside sites. Formal tends to relate more to park sites, but it would include housing sites, and we have an officer that's based in our team that deals predominantly with housing sites as a specific area as opposed to being more broadly spread across the whole borough.
Councillor Evans?
Thank you. I have a question with regards to the customer satisfaction ratings on page 51. It says that you deliver 100 cards a month. Are you able to supply me with a list as to where those have been delivered to?
I will need to check.
But you can, yeah.
That I believe we can provide you with.
Because I think that's potentially where the councillors could come in, because we obviously regularly deliver leaflets and...
They are, generally they're selected so that they are delivered at random. So they're randomly selected from the electoral roll. So the addresses that they're sent out to is it's a random selection.
I've never seen them before. I didn't even know you did them. So
I think Paul's...
Chair, if I may, to give you an example, I actually walked my dog a couple of months ago and I delivered him myself to a plethora of addresses throughout Stockingford, Crow Hill, Attleborough. I actually went and delivered them myself. But ordinarily what happens is we pick a number, say number 10, and we go through the electoral roll and pick out 10 Berwin Way, 10 Arby Road, 10, so they're done via a number. They won't, so it's a scattergun approach across the whole borough instead of just maybe hitting Crow Hill, for instance, as for example. So that is the method it's done, and we record where we send them to. Point well made with reference to members, but that would tend to find that you'd be in a patch unless we give them to all members, and members that did it in that way. We could, but we can discuss that. That's a thought, something we should consider.
Councillor Graham?
Thank you, Chair. Following on from that, I was wondering if you weighted that to any extent, because, for example, you could have some cul-de-sacs, for example, in my ward, like Ashford Drive, where you've got a lot of trees and shrubs that the council are obliged to cut back, and then you've got roads like Woodland Street, which are long rows of terrace houses with very little greenery on. So I personally would recommend weighting these 100 that go out month towards places where there is a lot of council maintained greenery, because you'll then get better responses. At least that's a view that I'd say. Also, on the monitoring performance, there's a formal and informal. Could you let me know more about what informal entails?
Informal relates to the nature of the site, so it could be such as a countryside, typically a countryside site such as Bedworth Slough, the Nook would be another example in your particular wards. The reason that we distinguish between them is that typically they have less maintenance operations undertaken on them than you would typically see within a more formal park, such as Nuneaton Park, for example.
Yeah.
They won't have things like formal bedding, they won't necessarily have formal shrub beds. They would more likely have informal shrub beds, full beds, grassland, but that grassland may be wildflower meadow, so it would have a different maintenance regime.
Okay, well that makes a lot of sense. What else comes under formal other than the Premier Parks?
Within formal, you would have, essentially, we would think typically of more parkland open spaces, so community parks, local parks.
So flower beds in town centres?
Flower beds in
something
town
like that?
centres, they would come through that. Our cemeteries would, our housing sites would be included in that as well.
All right. Also, I know that there's quite a lot of these rectifications under shrub beds, and that certainly correlates with a lot of the things I've been reporting this year on behalf of residents. I understand that the Parks Department is looking more and more into replacing shrub beds with easier to maintain plant life. Could you give us more detail on that and how you'll be seeking to do that?
At the moment, we're looking at the process of, in some instances, rationalising shrub beds, but where opportunities arise, we'll be looking at potentially in future using different species of plants so that they're easier to maintain going forward.
Yeah, certainly I think that a major issue is when you've got things like hedges on bends and things like that that the council are reluctant to maintain when it's nesting season. I think in general we should be looking at a lot less of that and a lot more easy to maintain plant life, and I hope we'll be able to invest in that over next year.
Can I just say, it's not that we're reluctant to maintain the hedges during bird nesting season. It's a government act that we don't maintain them. Within the new contract, which we'll allude to in a moment, we are going to look at, it's 25% reduction year on year, and we are going to look at which 25%, because there's some that need doing every year and some that don't need doing at all. So it's how we work that through the system. And when David mentioned the word rationalisation, we are looking at removal, not when we said rationalisation, removing a significant number of shrub beds over this winter, particularly those that cause us, and you as members, and members of the public, problems. And we would encourage members to give us that kind of information. If you've got, I've had yourself, so have given me that information, and Kyle mentioned it to me beforehand, but we are getting other members also giving us that kind of information. So if members wish to, or have information from residents where they would like us to consider one for removal, then please let us know, because we are going to do that bit of work in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sargent?
Yeah, just answering that what you just said. Can you let people or members know that what which bed you're going to take out? Because what happens is we're talking the talk and walking the walk, and then all of a sudden it's gone, and everybody's going, "What's happened there?" And we go, "I don't know." So because on the other side of it, people might want it to stay, and there may be a situation where they may be able to maintain it themselves or do something towards it. I've maintained some trees down Maple Park, down the cycleway, touch wood. I think there's only 7 that are completely dead, but when it started there was about 27. So, if there's a way of keeping stuff or somebody wants to maintain it, then I think if you can let members know, then at least there's an opportunity there for them to say, well, yay or nay, isn't there? Or let people know.
Just to clarify that, Joe, that obviously when we're talking about shrub removal from housing sites, we will only do that where residents have been consulted and agreed to
Yeah.
that. So it's not a case of unilaterally just sneaking in the middle of the night and removing it, so people wake up in the morning and find it's gone.
Yeah.
What we are aware of, though, Chair, are a number of areas where, particularly on some of the, and I think Councillor Gran has alluded to this, there are some areas that are very difficult to maintain because they are on the highway verge and in dangerous locations where it's not possible to actually maintain it. So, thinking of your patch, Councillor, if you know the coming round the corner out of Attleborough onto Avenue Road towards the Pelican Crossing on the left there is a shrub bed there which is effectively impossible to maintain because of its location. We'd have to close the road to maintain it. So that's one that we've earmarked for removal. It's on the highway verge, but we've been asked to remove it by the Highway Authority because it's actually quite dangerous, it obscures views, etc. And because we can't maintain it effectively, it's a highway danger. So we're looking principally where they are constituting a danger. We've got some in Bedworth that are similar, around near the Bedworth Sloughs as you come round, which we've also been asked to remove, so we'll be taking those away. And then it's a case of them working through housing sites with the housing officers and consulting residents to see. There are some areas where it presents a particular issue in terms of crime and disorder. So under our crime and disorder duty, we're looking at sites which are, shall we say, less salubrious, where people feel unsafe because the area is shrouded in darkness because of the growth, etc. So we're looking at trying to make places more open so that people feel safer. So when we did the exercise a couple of years ago on Abbey Green, we opened Abbey Green up, and I think that's made quite a significant difference to Abbey Green in terms of its appearance and also in terms of the safety aspects for it. That's what we're looking at across the piece. So where we can do it, we're hoping to do that, and at the same time open areas up to make them more amenable for use by members of the public.
Can you let us know that? Because there's
Yes.
nothing worse. Somebody, even that bit you've mentioned there, somebody will go mad about that, as you know.
Yes, I appreciate
So
that. So
if
we'll
we're
provide
pre-warned, we
we
can
can
start
provide that.
talking people into. I mean, I don't disagree with what you said there,
Yeah.
because I've raised that one up before myself.
Mrs Ross?
This might not come under parks and gardens, but parking on footpaths, vans and lorries, does that come under the scope of this or not? No, not at all.
County Council.
No. Okay, thank you.
Although I understand there's some, I think I've read an article, I've seen an article about they're trying to do something in Parliament in order to try and do something for the future in England. I think that applies to certain places.
It's just,
I
again,
don't think
it's
it
just
applies
when the lorry comes round to clean and so on, and vans and lorries are parked, they have to go round them, and, you know, leaves are a mess with leaves and what have you at the moment. So, I just wondered if there was any correlation.
Councillor Elliott?
Thanks, Chair. Page 50 talk about the wet weather and extensive growth, etc., which I do remember was listed last year. And last year we hadn't kept pace with it, and this year they have kept pace with it. So just credit where it's due for that, and I'll be watching out for it next year. So that's good. I just wondered whether we are allowed to know what the default notice was issued for or not.
I can advise you that I don't have that information
Okay.
with me here immediately at hand, but I can advise you.
Okay, thank you.
Unless you know.
I can't be
Orchard Way. Yeah. There was an overgrowth in Stockingford on Orchard Way, which had grown too high over the railings. We got to the point, there were some higher issues that we had to deal with first. So we'd gone, and rightly so, and we were defaulted for because we got past the cut-off point.
Councillor Guthrie?
Thank you, Chair. I fully welcome this report. I have a few questions. The graph is for basically for farmers. Farmers want grass because they feed the cattle in the winter. They make it in the summer, feed the cattle in the winter. Last year they were short of grass. This year they're not short of grass. Second point is, can you expand on the operational difficulties experienced, please?
By that I was alluding to this season because of the weather patterns that we've experienced during this particular summer period, between sort of April and even into the early part of August. Because we've had intermittent good weather, warm days, plenty of sunshine followed by rainfall, where typically you would, and that was the reason I included the graph. It is difficult to see with it not being in colour, but you can see that in last year, whilst it initially peaked quite high, it tailed off when you went into the early part of July, largely because of the hot weather. However, this year, when we got into July, we were still having wet weather, so it was still spiking. So operationally, it means that even though you might get round and cut everywhere that you needed to cut, if you're working on a cycle, by the time you were getting back to commence the next cycle of grass cutting, many of us will have experienced this ourselves, I'm sure, in our own gardens. You've cut the grass and you come back to it the following weekend and it's put on another 100 millimetres or more. When you consider that we're looking after somewhere in the region of 3.5 million square metres of grass, obviously that has an impact in terms of how you manage that. You lose a couple of days either because of a bank holiday or because of inclement weather, and all of a sudden you fall behind, and then it's trying to catch that up, which is why we needed to bring in additional resources.
Is it because we haven't got enough machines? The contractor hasn't got enough machines, or hasn't he got enough staff to make with these peaks and troughs?
It's not about enough machines. Obviously, when you sort of set a contract like this up, you sort of allow a certain number of cuts, how long it will take. Obviously, over the last few years, things have changed dramatically to how it used to be. But what we tend to do now, we're sort of a bit more ready for this year, hence it's been nowhere near as bad. It's a case of having staff stand by or available for a weekend and make up them hours. That's the way we get around it now, and also the way we've set it up now, from sort of learning over the last sort of 3 or 4 years of where we have sort of our core staff and the amounts of seasonal staff we would expect to require to maintain the contract. We've got partners now within sort of employment agencies that can supply staff, so we can sort of sort that out. So the main element of where we work it, because unfortunately the machines aren't there to get out when you need them, is getting staff requirements, changing their working patterns. That helps us now, and that's moving forward. That's the way to work, to sort of preempt these sort of procedures now.
Thank you. Can I just say that we've just had some grass cut up at Whitestone in the rain, and not being funny, there was a lot more left on the road than there should be. In the rain it was. And the grass hadn't been cut for the best part of 3 to 4 weeks. And I am waiting for them to come, the contractor to come and do Thornhill Drive, the swamp there, and we're going to have some major works. And I understand we can't start till September because we can't cut hedges we can only cut hedges, from September to February because the birds nest for the rest of the season. But we can cut visual strips from, I believe it's July. And this year the hedges have grown more this year than they have last year. So I am waiting to see when you come to do Thornhill Drive. Thank you.
We'll take that on board, Chair.
I've got 3 councillors indicating to speak who's already spoke, if that's right, grammar or whatever it is. Okay, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. There are just some more observations I wanted to make. First of all, it's just a point I hope Glendale can take back. It was on the Bedworth Community Forum last weekend that you did like like an open day sort of thing at the Miners Welfare Park. A lot of people said that wasn't advertised very well, so do that again. Could we possibly go on social media and whatnot? Because there was quite a lot of interest from residents about, you know, what tractors you use and all that sort of stuff. So I just wanted to say that. And Dean, I've been to Laburnum Close again today, and the hedges still haven't been cut back. So I just wanted to know, why is it that the workers went out, cut one hedge, and then just left the other when they were next to each other?
The one on the far side of the, or
Yeah.
the other side?
Far side.
That should have been completed on last week, to be honest.
Yeah, it still isn't. And it's a safety hazard because people are reversing out, and you've got kids which are running out of the entrance, and you can't see the kiddie windows coming out.
Well, I'll go with the tennis balls.
That would be great, yes. What was the other thing? Oh yes, the grass at the Nook still hasn't been collected from the Thursday volunteers. So I went this afternoon, Dean.
They got their last load today.
I went at 11 o'clock, so...
Yeah, they finished about 2.
Oh, okay. Right, that's okay then. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry. And just one last thing. David, as part of the new contract, will that include Glendale Live? And if so, could I ask, will that include something where I can just directly report it to Glendale instead of me having to go through 3 officers and then that gets passed on?
Can I come back to that on my short presentation? Yeah, so if that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. One is regarding large green areas where grass is cut in 2 different sections, where you have the inside that's cut, and then you have the outside verges which are cut separately because presumably they need different equipment. What I've noticed is that in a lot of these places there's quite a large amount of time between the inside and the outside being cut, and I've had a few complaints that it looks quite daft when they've done that. So is it possible for the council to be able to organise those to take place a lot sooner to each other so that it doesn't look, well, bizarre for the residents that live there? And another is regarding rectifications in cemeteries. I don't know if that comes under this report or not, but I feel like it would be good to have more details on rectifications and complaints regarding cemetery maintenance, since we've had quite a few complaints about that this year, more than usual, and considering there's going to be some changes in the way that cemeteries are maintained, I think that's something that we as a panel should be able to monitor. So would you be able to look into that, please?
On that first question, Chair, I think it's probably one for Barry and Dean to perhaps respond.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we would aim to cut them more or less at the same time, but going back to sort of weather patterns when it's wet, obviously the tractor gang mowers, which obviously cut the larger areas, it doesn't tend to slow that down as much, so they can more or less crack on. It's when the verge team mowers or the hand team mowers fall behind, and then the problem then, if we sort of jump ahead to try and cut them areas, it throws everything out of sync. It's something we try to pick up as quickly as possible, but when we have conditions like this, it does make it difficult.
Okay, but how soon do you aim to get that done with? Because I've noticed one particular example that I've had to report about 3 or 4 times over the last couple of years with Linley Road, where for whatever reason the green there, it always takes about a fortnight between the outside being cut and the inside being cut. And I've not noticed that much of a delay in other similar patches.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would suggest that that kind of time delay is too long.
Yes.
And you know, there may well be isolated aspects where we need to look a bit more closely. This happened several times over the last couple of years or so. We generally would look to get the areas completed in terms of primary cutting and backup cutting within 48 hours or so of each other.
Well, that sounds about right if that can be achieved. Yeah, I didn't really get an answer about the cemeteries query, so I don't know who would be best.
We can certainly provide more detail on rectification. I have to say though, Chair, my recollection is I think we've had less complaints in cemeteries this year than we did last year. Looking at David and Paul, but I wasn't aware that there would be an increase. I thought it actually decreased.
Well, I've certainly had an increase in any case, and I know there's been some incidents in Galley Common which have been quite severe, which have been raised.
In cemeteries?
Yes.
Can I just say something about cemeteries?
I've got Councillor Condicor, so down to speak next, Councillor Sergeant.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of things. Great, I've seen them work on Saturdays. Saturday catch-up is really good, so yeah, I've seen them at Rydam, so that's good. We talked about beds being taken out. One of the problems with beds being taken out is sometimes they're not being grassed and they end up being weeds. There's been a few of those on some of the housing sites. So I do hope we have a good look over that actually when we do take beds out, the grass is re-established, because we've got some beds have fallen from various places. And finally, the other big moan are bins. We used to call them dog bins, now they're just waste bins. But the emptying of them on the Wellington Trail and around Sandon Park is a great cause for continuous complaints. And Philip has told me they're supposed to be emptied twice a week or something, but not on a specific day. And it really, I mean, you can blame the residents for not stopping putting stuff in them when they're full, but it is also useful to understand that just before weekend and just after the weekend is a good time to bank holidays actually make sure they're fully empty on the Friday before bank holiday. And unfortunately there's been an awful lot of housing built in Wellington, which actually means the number of times they're emptied may need to be reviewed. And somehow you, rather than Glendale always getting blamed, if they do need emptying 3 times a week rather than twice a week, that needs to somehow be communicated through the contract, because I say we've got so many dog walkers now from all these new houses that they moan at me and they'll moan at the Parks Department, but actually it may be we don't have enough capacity with all the extra dogs.
One thing we're looking at in the new contract, we're going to be running a 5/7 week, so there'll be a permanent presence on the contract, so the things like dog bins, whatever, that will go through the weekends where we have issues, where we know we have issues, where they're really well used, and if they're full on the weekend we struggle, so that will hopefully help resolve.
That'd be great news, because it's always the same week. You almost know if it's been a nice weekend that actually first thing emails full of dog bins are full.
Sorry, if I may, Chair, as well, just to come back to Councillor Parker. Something that Barry actually we were talking about at lunchtime today is, and something that I'm going to speak to colleagues about, is that particularly in your ward where we have had a number of new developments that have come in, there are areas in there where the sites themselves, where they've laid out public open space, it has not yet been adopted by the local authority, and the maintenance of those sites still rests with the developer. And we are picking up anecdotally, but we're starting to gather more evidence that in some instances their maintenance frequency is considerably lower than what ours would be. So you've got facilities on their sites becoming unusable, which is having the effect of then displacing more people into, they're then coming into our open spaces and using the facilities that are in there. That is something that we're going to work with. We're going to speak to our colleagues in planning about, where necessary, speaking to some of the developers about their maintenance, where they haven't yet reached a point where they'd be transferring them to our maintenance.
Councillor Sergeant.
I was in Bucks Hill Cemetery, and there was a Glendale fellow there who was trimming the grass or doing something, and he was basically he was grumping a little bit because he was on about a weed killer or something, or grass, something from grass stop it growing or something, and he wasn't allowed to do it in the cemetery. What was that? What's that all about? He was doing a good job, by the way. But
Yeah, no, it's something he was just moaning about. No, it's something we're looking at. Using grass growth retardant, that we want to trial it with, but it's got to be put in at a certain time of year. And we'd spoke to staff we were going to do it, but unfortunately now it's something they need to do sort of late spring in order for it to work. So it's something we will be trialling next year.
I think he was kind of indicating because it was a cemetery and he wasn't going to be allowed or something.
No.
It's our first choice.
Chair, we'll pick that up in Paul's presentation because
Yeah.
growth in visitors in cemeteries was one of the things that we actually wrote into the specification. So, for cemeteries. So it's something Paul deal with when he gets through his presentation.
Right, I think it's time for Paul's presentation now. After all that,
It'll be very,
let's
it'll be
shoot
very
back to a
quick.
good one, yeah?
It'll be very quick.
Can I just
I'm
ask?
going to ask.
Can I just ask before you start? Are you going to email us all a copy of this, please?
Yeah, you can do. Yeah,
Thank you.
there's nothing on here that's
Right. Thank
needs
you.
adapting or anything. Right, bear with me because my eyes are really bad. And I've tried to get this as big as I can on the screen without it just blowing. So I apologise to you at the back who need glasses, or I do apologise. I apologise now, but I will talk. But if I send it out, you'll see what I'm going to say anyway.
Can you introduce Mike and...
Yeah, remiss. From Glendale, we've got Mike. Mark, who is it? Your second name?
You'll like me to introduce
Brunskill. No,
Yes, Mike
Mike
Brunskill.
Brunskill.
Yep. I'm the managing director for the North for Glendale.
We've got Barry Bolton, who's the general manager for the. Is it for the Midlands, Barry? And we've got Dean Harrison, who's the assistant contract manager for this contract, with us as well. I've been asked to present a short presentation to both this internal OSP and also the internal SOP, and myself and my ex-colleague Neil did a presentation previously to all members, I think it was, some time ago. This is some of this is a lift directly from that, and then there is some additional information which I'll get to. So if I've covered this before, I do apologise now, but it just gives you a flavour of what we've done. Oh crikey, I've done it again, bear with me. We took a new approach. We've developed the specification along the frequency model as opposed to the quality performance model that we currently adopt. This model provides the contract with a clear set of tasks and to be carried out within a defined time scale to a set frequency. This was the major recommendation from the Cabinet Cross-Party member group that considered grounds maintenance as looking at the grounds maintenance contract. Alongside that, we're looking purely at grounds maintenance, so there's no distraction with infrastructure maintenance or tree maintenance work. And to let members know, we have recently let the tree contract. Am I at liberty to say who they are? It is we've let the tree contract to a local company from Bedworth, who will take over that role from the 1st of November. We intend to have a pre-start contract meeting next week, so I'll be out. If members want to discuss that with me in any way, then please feel free to contact me. But yeah, a local company from Bedworth will have contract. We've also let which is not on here, we've also let the bedding supply contract has also been let recently, and that again is to a local company, actually from Atherstone, which is right on the border. And they will start supplying me for a 4-year period from April next year. Okay. Whenever the spring bedding finishes. What we've done with the contract is that the frequency model enables stringent financial and contract controls to be administered. We're using an electronic works management system, which has been a mandatory requirement of this contract, and the guys are going to use Glendale Live, which Councillor Evans referred to earlier. I'll give a bit more detail on Glendale Live if I can later. We've also built in rectification and default mechanism. We both carry financial implications, but to let members know, it's not a punitive amount of money. We can't fine somebody. It is a predetermined loss normally for our administration time that can be applied if we are issuing a rectification, a default, or a default failure notice. They are set within the confines of the contract. And if members wish to discuss that with me, feel free to have that conversation again. We believe that the contract we've put together will provide a contract that is better. It fits the contract's obligation, the council's obligation to its customers, both in terms of what we're doing and how we're going to manage it going forward. This is something that we talked about before. The specification itself is quite a detailed document, and it will be going online. It will be going onto the council's website. So if somebody wishes to go on, they can view each individual piece of the jigsaw, as it were. It's referenced via photographic reference, which shows how a site should look post-visit. It might not look like that 2 weeks, then post 2 weeks into after the account, but it shows how a site should look directly after the site has been left. Glendale Live will allow the operatives to go to a site, undertake the grounds maintenance, tick it when it's been completed, and take a photograph, a reference photograph, which will then be used by us to as a quality check. So we'll be checking Glendale's work through their system, paying them when they make their monthly put their monthly statement forward, based on what they actually physically do on site. It's not based on what we think they've done, but based exactly on what they've done. They'll have a reference photograph showing what they've done, and we will check, it's our intent to check, between 10 and 15%, Dave, on a monthly basis, the quality of that work. So not only are we checking that it's been done, but the quality of that work meets the specification as well. So that's what we intend to go out and check. We're currently working with Glendale on producing a standard quality reference manual, which all the guys in their vehicles will hold. Myself and Dean went out last week. We took a number of photographs across a number of sites. We're going to have a different set of standards, A, B, C, D. A being out of this world, B being what is acceptable, C being not, and D just being, well, we don't want to see any D's, we don't want to see any C's. But each member of staff will know exactly how they need to leave a site when they've left. There's no excuse not for knowing, and how Glendale use that going forward will be up to them, and how they talk to their staff and manage their staff. There is a frequency table, and again, I want you to share that there's not a secret. That's going to be online as well. It's going to be indicative. It shows, and I will quickly, I'll flick to it in a moment. It lists the 98 tasks that we take as a grounds maintenance operation. Grass cutting, for instance, will be 16 times a year. It's broke down into when, 3 times a month, we cut 3 times in May, for instance, 3 times in June, twice in August. It gives an indicative idea of when they're due. Each month, and you may tell me different here, guys, because that's why we're going to have schedule on a monthly basis. Is that correct?
Yeah.
We're going to schedule monthly, and we will work with Glendale to ensure that what they are required to do within the contract is undertaken, because we have the vagaries of the weather. If the weather is inclement for a week, we will stop grass cutting, notwithstanding what you said earlier about grass all over the roads, but we can, it's a movable feast, but residents, and I'll come on to Glendale Local in a moment, but residents will be able to access and know when they're going to be on a particular site at a particular time. Am I correct in that as well, guys? Okay, and I'll come back on to Glendale Local in a moment. That flexible scheduling should allow us to pick up any peaks and troughs in the weather, as has been mentioned by members during this evening. And it will allow us to stretch out as well, because I think we've said start grass cutting in April. Well, with all due respect, you guys know that the grass has been growing in January. So we will need to do a little bit of give and take, the first year, you're going to have to bear with us as we kind of work that schedule in. But 16 grass cuts is a lot of grass cutting on a grass verge, for instance. That is a lot of cuts. I think we've been doing 12, maybe 12.
Between 12 and 14.
Yeah, 12 and 14. So you took 4. You took an additional 4 cuts in. You are at the right time. You're talking a lot of cuts. So, and there's 16 cuts on cemeteries as well. But as I said, I will share that with members. These are just photographs. These are post-maintenance photographs, and these, you've seen, if members who came would have seen these before. That's what a rose bed should look like. That's what a grass plot should look like. That's what a highway verge should look like, with the obstacles either sprayed or scrimmed off. That's what a cemetery should look like. And we are, Councillor Sergeant, we are going to use grass retardant. It is a suggestion within the specification. It was part of the bid, and we have said that we will allow the contractors to use it if they see fit. They're going to have to do the 16 cuts, but if they wish to use the growth retardant, it is something they're going to look at and to trial. And cemetery seems a good place to look at that, because particularly the nature of the complaints and the contacts that we have from residents who have a problem with cuttings within the cemetery environments in particular.
Can I just ask if that's biodegradable?
I don't know, I've never used it. Sorry, Councillor, I'm not 100% sure.
Because I believe there is products on the market that are biodegradable.
We've started looking into it. We haven't actually made a firm decision of what amount of chemicals we're going to use. Because obviously we need to check stuff. Because majority where we'd want to use mid-round of the older sort of stones in cemeteries where it's difficult to get in between. So obviously we need to see what any effect it's going to have on headstones and that kind of stuff.
So a good agronomist, he will.
We will provide details of the product we propose to use, and we'll consider that with our colleagues in the council before we make a decision to apply.
Thank you.
But also it needs to break down so that it doesn't then have a long term. It does.
Yeah.
Maybe we could have a sort of little sheet or something explaining to members.
Well, talk data sheet or what we've done here. So.
Okay, a few more photographs. This is a couple of shrub beds and how they should look post-maintenance. However, that's a little to explain. Shrub beds, as I mentioned earlier, we should be maintaining, reducing shrub beds, 25% of them a year. So we need to look at how we look at that. David and I and the rest of the guys need to look at housing. Needs to be looked at predominantly, because it's housing areas that are the main problem that we find with shrub beds. So we are either going to take them out or look at those where we will be doing them possibly every year, because of the nature of them. So that's something in train.
I wish Catherine Wood Hall could look like that.
You what, sorry?
I just said I wish Catherine Wood Hall could look like that.
Flower beds.
The other thing with those pictures, you've got the shrub bed against the path, so if that's how you maintain it, it's instantly going to grow onto the path. You actually need to maintain it 1 or 2 feet back, so that if you maintain it once a year, there's enough room for a year's growth before...
Well, if I can, Chair, to be fair, Councillor, what we should be doing, if it's on against the footpath, we should be doing it more often. If it's the overgrowth there of footpath, should be doing more often, but your point is well made. Maybe we should be cutting right back in or taking that out, because that is just going to be a problem continually. It's not going to go away, and that's just we're just wasting good money, throwing good money after bad there. So that's the kind of thing we need to look at as a department. We need to look at where these are. Park Lane Flats are a really good example, where there's just shrub beds everywhere, right in nooks and crannies. Ryde Avenue is another good example, where there's so many there, they shouldn't be there in those locations. So that's something we are going to look at, as we discussed earlier.
Well, you take them out and turf them,
Indeed.
You're going to save money.
Indeed. And these are just more photographs as I like. Right, that's the frequency table. That's part of the frequency table, and you'll have to have the eyes of a Peregrine Falcon probably to see that, which is really difficult.
Is that frequency table going to be itemised to tell us when how many cuts you're going to do, i.e. for Rudesley Park?
Well, it does say on there.
Oh.
It's saying formal grass cut.
But is it,
I'm going to have to go close to it.
isolate the area, please?
No,
Like
but
this needs
crikey,
to be.
it'd be 13,000 lines.
Well, put, Philip emailed us a copy of the cuts,
Yeah.
but it's all right having the cuts, but you don't know where they're going to cut.
Well, you,
And we wanted some
well,
meat
you can
on
have
the
a
bone.
I can give you a description of what an informal. All you need really is just there's two types of cut. There's a formal, which is the floral areas within in the two main parks. So,
But we completely get that.
Yeah,
What
okay.
we're asking is, what we want to see on that table is the location. So it's all good. It's all good saying formal grass cut. We want to know, is that Miners Welfare Park, at Wilson Playing Field?
Correct.
The microsite.
Yeah.
the microsite will tell you that. We'll come on to the microsite in a moment.
Yeah.
Could you divide it into the different wards?
That's a good idea, actually.
You could do, yeah.
In what respect? Sorry. You've got us to go through every single site, telling you what every single line. That is a mammoth piece of work that will do. What the microsite does, however, which these guys are willing to come back and demonstrate. I understand. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, I did put together a small presentation, but what I said earlier was that I've got static screenshots which might help to explain some of the questions you're raising in terms of a full live active demonstration. We're building the system now because, as Paul points out, there are 14,500 assets, pieces of data. We'll arrange a separate live demonstration, but I can still show the static information that I've got here.
What that microsite does, any member of the public, any yourselves as members, can just dial in, you can put an address or a site in, it will drill straight down into it, and it will tell you when there's you, and when, and it will give you that, it will give you that information. So,
But will it tell you how many times they're going to cut it that year? Because we're now on frequency
not
cuts.
the free. No, it won't. Sorry, Mike.
Could I suggest? So, we have Glendale Local is the term we give to a microsite, a website dedicated to providing information about the service. We can put a frequency table in there which shows you the frequency of each operation that's carried out, and that operation, the frequency of that operation will be the same everywhere across the borough. Separately to that, we can have the Glendale Local, where you can type in the search criteria a postcode or an address or a site name, and that will tell you when it was last maintained, down to the level of bin empty, grass cut, shrub prune, hedge
Whatever
cut.
assets on that site.
Hmm?
Whatever assets.
Yeah,
on that
whatever
site.
asset is on that site. In some of the larger parks, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of assets. And it will tell you when it was last done and when it's next going to be done. Combining the two things together, i.e. the frequency at each location, will produce a table with 14,000 assets that won't be very informative for on a day-to-day basis. So you'll know when something is due to be done and when it was last done, and separately you'll know that if it's a football pitch, it's due to be line marked so many times, or if it's a bin, it's due to be emptied so many times across the year.
I can give members, if I may, a rule of thumb, a document. 90% of the grass in this borough should be cut 16 times a year. And with 10% being, probably about right here, Barry, if I may, 8% is cut and collect, which is twice, sorry, cut and collect. 8% is the cut and collect, isn't it? Cut and collect on the environmental areas, and 2% is formal areas, which are the two parks, the three roundabouts. When I say the formal parks, it's the area in and around the floral areas in the two main parks, and there's a couple of areas within the cemeteries as well. A couple of the cemeteries. That is your grass cut. Predominantly, that is it. We would have to go through it. I'll have to go back and look at that, if I may, and I'll come back to members. It's a fair question, and one we'll have to consider, but you could be talking several weeks of work to actually physically do that. What you're suggesting, to have that on every single line, having that information attached.
I think the other thing, Chair, is that whilst it's a frequency contract, the reality is that the frequencies will change every year. So it would be kind of misleading to say there will be 16 cuts in any given year, because in some years it might be less because the weather, as we did last year, it becomes very hot and the grass just stops growing, and we're not going to cut grass areas if the grass isn't growing because of dust. In other years, maybe that we have to increase the frequency beyond 16 because of as in this current year, the magnitude of the growth is such that it started and has continued right the way through the summer season, right up to now. So that might necessitate having to look at whether we introduce additional cuts simply to keep the grass at specification. So to say 16 is probably to say it's an average of 16, but year on year you may get variations as a result of the weather.
There's only a couple more slides if I can. Evaluation, just to let members know, we received a number of high quality tender returns. In fact, we received 6 returns, all of very, very good quality. It was based, the evaluation was based 45% comprised, it's listed there, remember, I won't just read that verbatim. We had very detailed briefs that went out with the tendering information, which all the tenderers had, and their responses and their bids were based around those detailed brief requirements. And we used those to evaluate, to benchmark, to ensure transparency, consistency, fairness, etc. And Glendale were successful not only on price but also on the quality of their overall bid. And we had 6 bids. There's a list of benefits that run into 3 pages, and these are just lists of what the Glendale bid offers. Frequencies applied to meet growing situations, shrub bed rejuvenation, weed treatment using chemicals. We're going to look at a different methodology. We're going to work with the guys at how we can get around that. Contractual process, contract related details, so they're going to have a link directly to Firm Step, and they will be answering, it's something Kyle said earlier, it was how they're going to answer, whether you can contact Glendale directly. Glendale will have a link to Firm Step, and they will be sent directly inquiries, and they will be then answering those inquiries and closing the loop. So they'll be answering the question, they will be answering, this is still coming to us,
yeah,
but they'll be directed to Glendale.
Yeah. So is it a bit like the website fixmystreet.com?
It's very similar. Very similar to that.
If that's the case, and that's very good.
They'll be coming into us. We're working with IT at the moment on the capture form. We're currently working on that, which is going to be have links directly to our website.
Yeah.
And if you answer a certain question in a certain way, I'm not an IT man, but it's going to direct the inquiry directly off to a third party. So we'll directly send it to the county, for instance, and or directly to Glendale. So that's how it's intended. That's its intention.
Yeah.
We're going to trial it because we have to trial these things over the winter to try to knock out some of the glitches. But the intent is that from day one, that's the intent. Glendale will be getting a lot more of the inquiries to deal with directly.
Yeah. I think that's a very good idea for what it's worth. I mean, I did an audit of my casework in the last municipal year, and 86% of my casework was Glendale related, which is quite sad actually. But you know, instead of me having to ring up Glendale 3 times a day, I think this system would be far better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul, I'm just a country bumpkin, but the contract starts in November, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you said that you haven't got the software up and running yet. You've got glitches in the system.
No.
Now it's September, and it's 2 months. Well, less than 2 months.
This is the council. No. There's not glitches in our system. It's the knockout.
Will the system be up and running by?
This isn't Glendale's system, by the way. This is the council's one.
Will our
Glendale's
system be up and running by November?
Our system will be. Well, it's not imperative that it does, because this is our. Just to give you some indication, we may have 100 inquiries, 200 inquiries a week during the summer. In the winter, we have 3. So it gives us an opportunity to build the system, develop the system and have it up and running for when the issues really start. And we've been working with Glendale on this, we've been working with our IT, and it closes the loop on our lean review, which we started 6 years ago on customer inquiries, and it kind of hopefully puts a line under it, and it may be a model that we can develop for the rest of the authority. It's how they come in and how they're dealt with and how they go out. We've talked about grass retardants, and that was in the contract, and as I said, payment will then be made on completed works. The submitted tender offers significant savings to both the General Fund and HRA. Glendale put substantial investment in new machinery over the life of the contract, several hundreds of thousands. All hand-operated machinery in cemetery operations will be electric battery operated. I have seen them myself. They are working, they've had delivery, they're being used now. The benefit of that is carbon footprint, better for the operatives because there's less vibration and there's less noise as well, particularly in cemetery environments. And that includes the stand-on machines as well, if that's right, Barry. Yeah, so that includes the stand-on machines as well. All staff to be paid as a minimum the real living wage, so that works with our own council policies.
That's in operation now as well.
Sorry?
That's in operation now.
And that is in place. The staffing levels were the closest to we had undertaken an exercise how we would have operated the staffing during the winter and summer, and Glendale's had the closest to our expectations. You can see for yourself the mitigation in place for resources. It's something Councillor Goodrich mentioned earlier. The introduction of web-based software, which is Glendale Local and Glendale Live, which, as they've indicated, they'll give you a demonstration of Glendale Local in due course. Glendale Live is the system that we will be able to access and operate, and it's much more detailed, and if members wish to discuss that with us, we're more than willing to have that discussion. As it says, it's transparent, etc., etc. They're committed to using zero-emission vehicles for supervisors. I think you have 2 vehicles with zero emissions for your supervisors. Apprentices will make up 5% of the workforce. 100% of recycling of non-contaminated waste. Reducing chemical usage, KPIs, reducing of paper. These are all lifts from the bid. Development engagement strategy with the council, setting out when frequencies for engagement MPPs and users. This is quite important, and we're going to have where they meet with council residents, they do the walkabouts, they're going to meet the representatives of the REC or whatever manifestation we're in now. So that's important, these guys are going to work that through. They're committed to dealing with complaints within 2 days for urgent, 5 days for non-urgent, and that links to the direct link with the firm step and the CRM. And they're going to produce leaflets, notices, posters, etc., which can sit within housing sites, and we're going to work through that over the next couple of months. I'm sorry if I went on a little bit, and I do apologise, and I hope that kind of covers where we're at. Sorry, Chair, that I've taken so long, and I do apologise.
Thank you, it's been very informative.
Well, that's a short presentation, I hate to see a long one.
No, sorry.
Yes, it was very informative.
Sorry, I apologise.
I think that you've answered some questions that people had in the back of their mind about what was happening, and this is definitely the way forward. Anybody, any other questions apart from the ones that were asked before, Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. Just like some more detail on what your mitigation plans are regarding your employees and staffing, because it seems to be a running theme that the weather we get each year is more and more unexpected. So what are the contingencies in case we get a period where we have a lot of continuous growth over a 6 or 7 month period? Because I've noticed that with the extra work that's required of the new contract, But of course that must mean you need to hire more people and have more flexible staffing than before. So I was just wondering what your plans were specifically to deal with the challenges.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things obviously a big benefit straight off is the 5/7 work day. So we will have a presence 7 days a week. So that gives us obviously the weekend period the flexibility of where we need to be, or where we need to be, and how we can move the staff around of what we need to do. We'd have a base level of what we want to cover over the weekend, which is like the bins and play areas and that kind of thing, where we sort of fall down at the moment. But one thing that's worked quite well this year, obviously we have our sort of core level of staff throughout the year. We have the numbers of fixed term staff that we want through the main period of the growing season. Because of the relationship we've got with certain sort of agencies at the moment, that gives them the flexibility to be able to act much quicker when we see a spike coming up, where we can get people on board. So we've got more control over the labour element. So the biggest element that's going to help us the most moving forward is the 7-day working week. So.
As was noted earlier, this year we've managed to adapt to a more challenging year than last year was, in terms of flexibility of resources, and that's something we're learning from each year. We can't predict what the weather's going to be next year, and nor can anybody else. We just have to look at trends and patterns. Within the new contract, we're looking at initiatives like Barry's outlined to be more flexible and nimble of foot, so we can respond to changes. And in terms of a medium to long-term strategy, ideally we would like to be carrying some of our fixed-term seasonal staff through the winter period, because they have had the investment in training, they've built up knowledge of sites, they're therefore more efficient and effective. And that's something is not within our gift, it's in terms of working with our colleagues in the council to find packages of winter work that are genuinely needed, like some of the shrub bed renovation, etc., that will allow us to carry those staff through. The less staff we have to recruit from a standing start at the beginning of the growing season is so much the better for us, and obviously in turn for yourself, and for local employment opportunities.
No, absolutely, and for them as well. Just trying to work out what the catch is, because it seems to me that this contract is superior in pretty much every way to the last ones. I'm just trying to work out, what the catch is, because we've been struggling enough with the previous contract, and we're taking on a new one with more demands, rightfully more demands. I'm just trying to work out how you're dealing with those challenges.
Well, with a new long-term contract, that enables us to invest in terms of training, time. The 5/7 working pattern is going to take some time to introduce. It will involve consultation with the staff. One of the primary answers to your question is that we're investing over £500,000 in new equipment at or near the commencement, and certainly by the start of next season's grass cutting. That will make a significant impact in terms of reliability and effectiveness, and we're retaining some of the old equipment fully serviced to reduce downtime when inevitably there are going to be machine breakdowns, in order to make sure we can keep the productivity up, and that will be one of the improvements we've been able to make. It's very difficult to make substantial investment when you're on a sort of rolling or towards the end of a contract, the same as any organisation would find that challenging. A new contract enables us to make that investment in people and equipment.
And looking at things from more of a macro point of view, do you find that council contracts are usually up at around the same time, or do you have a continual stream of income? Because I was just wondering to what extent you can invest from getting a large contract elsewhere in order to keep up a contract that you've still got for another couple of years, for example.
Yeah, there is no pattern. It's increasingly less consistent than it used to be many years ago when I joined the company. So each contract, each service we provide is taken on its own merit. So this has been looked at very much specifically about what you require and what we are going to deliver as per the specification, the proposals we put together that Paul's outlined.
Okay.
Councillor Gundicor.
Just a quick question. It's mentioned recycling as much as you can. Obviously, most of your waste is actually green waste, so it's composting rather than recycling. Is that done locally, or what? How's the?
It has been for the past 4 years.
Councillor Elliott.
questions for Paul. I know we've got to cut costs, but can you give me some reassurance on the removal of the shrub beds? 25% per year, did you say?
It's not removal, sorry, it's
Redu-
We've allowed for 20% reduction, that means to the,
Pruning.
right to the floor each
Serious
year.
pruning.
It's serious pruning, and if you work that across the 70% of the beds or 60% of the beds will never need, or very occasionally will need cutting back. We can concentrate on those shrub beds that are causing the problems year on year on year on year. And what we are going to do is to target removal of those shrub beds that are really causing us problems through sight line, as Phil alluded to sight lines, section 17 problems with community safety, ones that are in front of people's windows and grow. There's one at Hall End, for instance, that it's over the top of the window now, for example. It's looking at those in a much more sensible way. If that answers your question.
In a cost-reducing way.
It's not necessarily from a cost perspective. This is more to do with being sensible, because you would have said 100% of shrub beds every year. That would have cost a lot of money, but 25% is a good stab in the dark. Well, it's not a stab in the dark. It's a good stab at what we need to do on an annual basis to reduce those shrubs that cause us majority of problems.
And the other thing, I just wondered, are we able to know who has the tree contract on the beds?
Yeah, I don't think of the name. Yes, Newman. Thank you, thank you, Mary. It's Newman Landscapes, and I do apologise. I went complete blank. The tree contract was by a company called Newman Landscapes, and the bedding supply contract is a company called R.C. Smiths.
Not Dobbies.
Not Dobbies. No, it's not Dobbies. It's R.C. No, it's definitely not Dobbies. It's R.C. Smiths.
Go on.
Yeah, I've got one last question. It's with regards to, there's a lot more people in the Nuneaton Bedworth who want to start composting in light of the new green bean charges and whatnot. One of the things that a lot of parish councils in Warwickshire are starting to introduce now are communal composting bins. And I'll be fair to Glendale, whenever I looked at other Glendale local websites in the area who do the contract elsewhere, you do have like a community initiative, as in, and I could see that from the Miners Welfare Park the other day. I just wondered if that's something that Glendale might consider doing as like a potentially not as part of the contract, but is it something that you could consider doing in the Nuneaton Bedworth, having communal composting bins?
We would absolutely welcome that, and in terms of it's a positive benefit for everybody. It will require us to work closely with our council colleagues in terms of, the sites aren't ours to determine what to do with them, but I'm sure that our team working with your officers can determine suitable locations where we can set up communal composting sites, if that is something that's that the organisation is interested in.
If I, Chair, just to answer, when we did the visits to, when we were looking at letting the contract, we went to Borough and Finesse, and we also went to Burnham. And in both of those locations, the housing areas had composting vessels, if you like, or literally wooden vessels on the side, within the grounds. So it is something maybe we can look at, maybe discuss it with our housing colleagues initially. It may be something we can discuss, trial, and see how it works, and it's something we can push out. So I think it's a really good idea.
Thank you.
If I can just add one more point, the more we can do that, if we can generate less waste by looking at the way we maintain shrub beds in the future and reducing maintenance liability, and therefore spending money more effectively where you would want it to be, rather than on what arguably are unnecessary tasks. If we can then minimise the distance that we're moving, even recycled green waste is still causing an adverse environmental impact if we're moving it from one end of the borough to another. So more local composting sites that are suitable, I think would be very beneficial.
Thank you for that. I'm really pleased with that response. Thank you.
Anybody else? I'd like to thank everybody for the reports, and thank Glendale and David and Paul for their insight to what's possibly going to happen. And it sounds as though once the new system's up and running, it'll be much more to the benefit not only to the residents but also to councillors to see what's happening in their particular patches. So I welcome the reporters and principals and look forward to the future. Thank you.
Are you just noting the report?
Yes, just noted. That's all.
And Chair, presumably you members would like to have a demonstration of microsite when it is
Yes.
available.
Yes. I would like to.
So we could organise that, Chair, as a sort of an all-member meeting, perhaps.
Yes, I think that's a positive thing. Once it's up and running, and we're okay.
Chair, could I suggest that we'd be very happy to lead and organise that and communicate it through the council and set something up to give you all the opportunity to see a live demonstration.
And we should do it as an all members thing.
Yeah.
So not only members of this panel, but
Everybody.
anybody else who's interested, including the co-opted members if they're interested. Yeah.
And residents.
Residents as well, anybody. We can throw wide open.
Oh dear.
We shall see what happens, but we'll get something sorted out in the not too distant future, because when this new thing comes in, I believe it's going to be a benefit for everybody. So I look forward to that, and presumably call a meeting in the not too distant future, and we'll look to see what the site's going to give. Okay, thank you for.
Are you just noting the report?
Yes, just noting the report, and thank everybody for all their hard work.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, I was just waiting for everybody to leave the room there, Abu. We're finally back onto the, to the agenda. Abu, are you going to give us a voluntary and community sector report, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. Where we've been quite in session so far, so I'll try and be quite quick. So you've had the report on kind of the final 2 quarters of 18-19 with regards to the performance of two key commissions, third sector organisations, which is Wiltshire Carver, Certification of Reaction, and the CAB. I think the key points to note is for both organisations, performance information is quite positive. Targets set have been exceeded for both. So for Wiltshire Carver, they had a target of working with 110 organisations throughout the year. They exceeded that by working with 125 on 147 different kind of projects and initiatives. A lot of that information is kind of detailed within the body of the report, so I'm not going to go through that, but it kind of some of the examples of work that they've done is we've supported ourselves on some work that we're doing with carers. It's kind of associated with work around loneliness and isolation. So we're supporting an organisation called Carers Trust that are the kind of main commission organisation to support carers across the borough. We did an initial event at the Nuneaton Centre, which is where Carver is based. That was really, really successful. We are now looking to do an event in Bedworth quite soon to build on the momentum. So that's really come from the fact that some initial work that was done, carers just felt that that kind of support mechanism is really lacking. A lot of them used to benefit from the Guidepost Cafe, which is now no longer around. Many of the workers that work for the Carers Trust were 2 feet across from that old organisation. So that's been a hugely kind of valuable piece of work and something that we're kind of developing at quite a quick pace. And then it's a raft of different organisations that they've worked with. Another example would be they've helped us form and develop an organisation called Strongly Together, which represents a myriad of kind of Eastern European communities, and that was another big area that we were lacking, and supporting them with kind of bringing in funding, developing the work that they're doing, and that's going really well. Around funding, you will see that over the year, about £2.3 million was applied for, of which £667,000 roughly has been approved, and then there's other elements that either hasn't been approved or they're still waiting to hear what's happening. So overall, it's been really, really positive, particularly in terms of kind of performance and the activity on the ground. Then they are also responsible for the volunteering part. There's a volunteering part of the contract, and again, with regards to that, it's kind of moving at quite a pace. They have a dedicated officer that is working with organisations to help them take on volunteers and to retain volunteers, and then secondly is to support individuals into volunteering. And the figures for the quarters and then the annualised figures are again within the report. Moving on to the CAB, again on that front, quarters 3 and 4, the performance has been good. They've exceeded the target in terms of contacts by 225. The wards that had the most number of people for the respective periods of quarter 3 and quarter 4 were Bede and Poplar, which is different to what was there in quarters 1 and 2. The areas of support haven't really changed. Generally, for a prolonged period of time, the two areas where people are coming in for advice, guidance, support, unsurprisingly, is number one, debt, and secondly, benefits. And I guess because it's not for that period, so we're reporting for quarters 3 and 4, but there's been a bit of a change in personnel, which is something that we'll kind of be picking up when we do the next report. But David Gooding, who's been there for 21 or so years, will be moving, well, will be retiring. So a new person has been appointed as CEO. So as part of our service level agreement, we were there as part of the recruitment process in an observer capacity. That was quite useful. It helped the trustees in terms of some of the questions, and a new CEO has been appointed. It's someone that we've worked with quite well on lots of key areas that the CAB does, but they historically worked with the county council, and now he's kind of over to the CAB, which will be really good. Someone that lives in Bedworth, knows Bedworth really well, but has worked in the borough extensively. It's not so, it's Bill Basra, it's someone that a lot of people that worked on different agendas would know. So it's a really good appointment, and I'm hoping to meet Bill next week. He's technically started, but David Gooding will be staying on until Christmas just to help him ease into that, and then beyond that it will be, I think, Bill will go on his own, but it's a really good to me. So happy to take any questions that you've got.
Any questions on Navy's report?
Yeah, we've got a very vibrant third sector. Yeah, when you look at all the organisations and things, but they've got a lot of problems as well, obviously. And one of the issues has always been finding rooms and places to meet, etc. And we've obviously got the Nuneaton Centre now being run by Carver. How is that working in terms of just a general availability, or is it always booked out by the same group of people, and do we have other places that groups can meet? Because you've got all these volunteers, you've got all these volunteer recruitments, but actually quite often it's actually the physical, somewhere cheap to meet that's an issue.
Yeah, I mean generally there is that challenge there. However, often it's down to the fact that people will not know about maybe some of the facilities that are available, because there are a number of, I wouldn't say hidden facilities, but just not known facilities. They might not be something that you can Google and necessarily find. So there's kind of some work that's been done around that in terms of kind of promoting and capturing that information a bit better. Interestingly, since Carver's taken over the running of the Nuneaton Centre, from kind of the asset transfer that occurred from us, the amount of usage is fantastic. I mean, they've got some services in there that operate till 11 o'clock at night, certain days throughout the week, some support services around kind of mental health and crisis. So it's just kind of breathed a new kind of lease of life into that facility. Generally, that's not a problem. We can always accommodate groups, whether it's there or as they have a room. As an example, a lot of groups don't know about that. It's free for them to use, and they're really supportive. We have a host of different size facilities across the borough. But any specific queries, if any, we get that, we do often get that. We can kind of pass it into our team, and we'll look to kind of accommodate them amongst partners.
Anybody else? In that case, could I welcome the report, because I want to burn a time on something to do with the third sector. I know how hard it is to work in the sector and how good work that it does, and the report indicates this is money well spent, and a lot of benefit. Could I also say, and I hope I'm not speaking on the third here, but can I wish David Gooden through this panel a happy retirement, because I, like many others, I would imagine, have known David for, I was going to say donkey's years, you know, how long is a donkey live? I think about 30 years or something, I've known David, and he's did excellent work, not only in Bedworth, but also within the borough. So if I could give the panel's thanks, and hope he has a healthy and happy retirement. Could you pass that on for us, please? Okay, thank you. Right. Item number 4, local tax support scheme. Rachel.
Hello, Chair. Good evening. So I'm here for the purpose of the report is to provide information around the consideration of the new council tax support scheme for 2021. Bit of a background is this for this next coming year is to try and increase the level of assistance for working age clients of our area, and to also try and simplify the administration of the current system that we have. It's to reduce the hardship for customers in our area, and also that we need to consider the cost of applying any changes to the system that we have. The customers that are affected by these changes are working age customers only, who are currently in receipt of monies from the scheme, and working age customers who may apply to the scheme going forward. Pension age customers will not be affected because their scheme is run by central government. A report was taken to Cabinet, which was approved, and that had a range of options. There's a copy of Appendix A in the report, and this was approved on the 24th of July. With a copy of this report and a copy of the consultation was sent to our main preceptors on the 2nd of September, and that's Appendix B, which is enclosed. And this was also sent to our volunteer partnerships, CAVO and the CAB. So they received their copies on the 2nd of September. It was open to the public on the 6th of September with an option for them to be able to answer the questionnaire, which is included in, like I say, Appendix B. It was open for 7 weeks. It'll be open for 7 weeks and 5 days in total, rather than what we would hope of the 8 weeks. Purely down to a technical issue, we weren't actually able to give the full 8 weeks. Hopefully, no one has actually said anything. We were able to send it to our partners for the 8 weeks. We just weren't able to put it out to the public for the full 8 weeks. We're 2 days short. On the consultation, it's available on the website, so if anyone would like to happily complete the application, the questionnaire, we would happily accept the views. That would be lovely. I've put put some information here regarding some financial information regarding the collection of council tax over the last several years. I've put some information on here about what the last collection percentages were, which was pre-council tax support, so that was the last year of council tax benefit, which is where we were able to pay people who are on low income up to 100% of their support, and that was the last time we were able to collect 97.52%. So we haven't actually been able to get back up to that level of collection. We haven't been far from that, but we haven't actually been able to get back to that. Last financial year we reached 97.04, and as at August we were on 47.41. As at this August, at the end of August, we were at 47.2, so we are slightly lower on last year at the moment. The amount of council tax debt outstanding, so for the financial years, the total of the financial years as at the end of the last financial year, so that was at effectively the 1st of April or 31st of March, the total debt outstanding was 5.2 million. Of that, 2.1 million was for the year 18-19. As of August, the amount outstanding was 4.3 million, but of that we had collected 936,000. Of that, 702 was for last financial year, so a significant amount was for the previous year, which is a normal occurrence. So usually you do collect quite a lot of the previous year from the debt. So there's still a significant amount of previous year's council tax debt that we do have to, that we still are recovering. That's kind of why I've kind of highlighted it here. So we have got, you know, quite a significant task to recover the debt. The council tax summons, I thought it would be useful for you to know the amount of summonses that we're sending out. So for the year 2012-2013, which again was the last year of council tax benefit, we issued 5,317 summonses. From then on, we moved on to the council tax support, where this is where we're expecting people to pay a minimum of 20%, whatever their income was. And the summonses moved straight away up to 7,400, and they've stayed that amount until 17-18, and from that point onwards we did start looking at a different way of looking at how we helped people, so that's where we started to introduce the financial inclusion type of work. And I've put an amount in of where we are at the moment, and we're as of the end of August we've actually issued 3,469 summonses. So my conclusion today is really for you to have to approve the consultation that we have, you know, consider the approval of the consultation that we have taken through the cabinet already, and just it's that's where we are at the moment, really. Has anyone got any questions?
Anybody got any questions? Councillor Condicorn?
Okay. Yeah, it's always a difficult area getting money from people who have difficult circumstances. Obviously, there's also in this mix trying to get money from people who have money but are just either incompetent at paying it or part of the awkward squad. So I don't know if you've got a feel for how many of the 5,000 or so summonses you do a year are actually people in financial difficulty or people who are actually just poor at paying and disorganised. And secondly, secondly, how many of those summonses actually you end up not being able to collect? I think it's £80, is it like that? How many are actually just uncollectible? So
I don't have that information. It would be difficult to be able to give you that information. We are, I couldn't summarise the difference. We are looking into with our new supplier of the enforcement with the new enforcement under the consultation that we're just undertaking at the moment, to see if there's a way we can identify the differences between the can't pay, won't pay. So that'll be an interesting way to see if we can look at helping the people who can't pay to the ones who won't pay. So that'll be something that we want to tackle going forward. And there will be ways that we should be able to identify that going forward, but it's not something that we can kind of split. We can split now. We do have cases where we know people can't afford, and that's where we pick them up through our financial inclusion support workers at the moment. So we do have cases that we can definitely identify, and we've picked them up through identifying through our enforcement team who they've forwarded on to them, or from our housing team, so they've been referred in. But to be able to pick them up from the numbers or from when we run the reports, that would be quite difficult.
If I may, Chair, 5,500 is about 10% of the borough's households, but is it actually like that, or some people summons more than once?
In a year, we probably wouldn't. We would probably not try not to summon someone more than once. That would be carrying on. If someone was, if we got to a position where somebody was summoned and then we were able to move on from that, and then it came to that situation again, that would be a customer that we would probably refer to the financial inclusion team, our FISOs, because that would highlight to us that there might be more of a problem. So we wouldn't really want to be going down that route. So that opens a bigger door as such. So we probably ask more questions. Not to say that I won't say that may have never happened, but that going forward is something that we want to look at further.
Councillor Tandy.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask, have you seen and noticed an increase in the non-payment of council tax since the introduction of universal credit?
There is the recovery of council tax has gone down slightly since the introduction, but it hasn't gone down massively. We do have with regards to council tax alone, there's not a big difference in the council's overall debt. There is some differences. What's affected is when people pay and how they're able to pay. People are struggling, and that's why what we're trying to do is look at different ways to be able to help them pay. And one of the things which is why with the council tax consultation we've put forward the suggestions of looking at different ways to look at the way we do our administration, so that if we can't afford to maybe change the limit that we're paying, but if we can look at changing the way we administer it, do the administration of the scheme, that will hopefully give our officers free up some of their time to maybe do some of the other work that we can help customers with, because sometimes it might not be about the money, because unfortunately some of the scheme that we're asking you to look at and consider is very expensive to the council, and some of it might not actually make a lot of money to the customer themselves, but maybe our time could be a better value. But that's why that's why those options have been given to you to consider, and to the public to consider. It's not always monetary value, sometimes it's our time that we can spend.
Councillor Nash.
It's okay, my question's been answered, thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. Where's Appendix A in the C?
Oh, I did forward them to be forwarded. I do apologise. They were sent to the officer.
You should have had a separate.
I can send them on to you.
You should have had a separate report.
Yeah, no, I'll send them on to you. I do apologise.
And the notice the financial inclusion support workers or officers, how many have we got?
We have 3 permanent ones here for Nuneaton, and we have a community finance officer as well. So they go out and about. So the community financial support officer, I do apologise, it's quite a long title, is currently they are financially supported by Warwickshire County Council. So that's a temporary arrangement at the moment. And we're hoping that they may extend that for us, but we don't know yet. So that runs until the end of January.
So, sorry, 3 based here?
Yes, 3 based, yes. 3 permanent positions and 1 temporary position.
And how long have they been?
They've been in place for several years.
Anybody else? Before we Councillor Conn, any new members? Councillor?
Yeah, finally, the consultation asks about different levels of council tax support, being 20 being the nominal.
20 is as it stands now.
Can you tell us what level of support the other councils in Coventry and Warwickshire are giving at the moment?
Yes, where the 20%, everyone apart from Northwarks is 15%, and Northwarks is 8.5%. So that means that Northwarks is the most generous, so they will pay up to 91.5%. So someone is on, so the minimum that everyone has to pay in Northwarks is 8.5%. The minimum anyone has to pay in the other authorities is 15%, and here is 20%.
So we've got the least generous scheme in Warwickshire.
We do.
Okay. So what's the recommendation is to note the approval for the consultation? I know Councillor Wonderful, I know you've got something coming up in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, do we get this coming back after the consultation's finished?
Yeah, that would be great.
Yes, the report goes, after the consultation's finished, it goes back to Cabinet.
So can we ask it comes back?
Can we get it, I know it's the Cabinet's.
I don't know if it would come back here, I think it would go back just to Cabinet.
Is there a time frame?
Yes, it has to go back to Cabinet by, I think it's November, hold on, I can give you the exact date, I do apologise.
So it's December 2019 on the work programme.
No, it's in November, it's definitely November.
It says November on
Well, actually, it's on.
We have a final meeting on the 14th.
13th of November, report to Cabinet.
What's it? Which cabinet is it again?
Oh no, it could be 12th of December, you could be right, it could be 12th of December, yeah. I have the 13th of November.
It says on there November 2019 and then December 2019. I don't know if there's been a mistake in the way it's been printed.
Does it have to go to council?
Yeah. No, did we just go, I don't think so, just go to the next one, last time it was just Cabinet.
No, what it says,
I've got it down, there's a cabinet on the 13th of November.
Yes, that's what I've got.
And presumably we've got the council
In December.
on the
Oh yes,
4th
sorry,
of December.
I found the list.
So,
Cabinet, hold on, let me just find
This panel's on the 14th.
so it's the day after.
Yeah. The next panel date's the 14th, it was the day after the Cabinet,
But before it goes full council.
or before it goes to full council.
So maybe we could have it back just to tell us what happens.
Alright.
Yeah, can we look into that, do you see if that's at all possible?
What
guess what you could do, Chair, if you wanted, was just we could simply put the Cabinet report that goes to Cabinet on the agenda for the 14th, and then we can report orally what the decision of Cabinet is, and that will be what will be going to full council on the 4th of December. So, yes.
That'd be marvellous, because then we can ask questions and
Okay.
see what happens.
All right.
Yeah, well, everybody happy with that? Okay. Thanks for the report. All right, item number 5, scheduled performance report. Philip?
Yes, Chair, thank you. If I can put it as item 10, Chair, but the report is the standard report that it's Q1, and members will have, there are a number of appendices attached, which I'm not going to go through in any detail, I'm going to throw out questions. I just wanted to flag one thing, and that is on page, well, I've looked at page 71, and that's the Regulation of Investigative Powers Act, just to confirm to the panel that there have been no covert investigations undertaken by the council pursuant to that act. And I'm alerting you to that because the Surveillance Commissioner would like you to know that. Beyond that, Chair, you then go into a series of tables, Appendix A, which have both financial information and some graphs showing various performance indices, either against target or not against target, as the case may be. Some are performance indicators, and some are performance measures, depending upon the particular service. What I will dwell upon is on page 73, and that is the table, the finance table, just to flag that where there are variances against budget, either plus or minus, you'll see that they are in bold. So that gives you a bit of a heads up in terms of where we are in terms of various matters in those financial tables. And then if you scroll through the rest of the report, you'll see then go into a bit more detail. So Jonathan is here to assist with any questions in terms of town centres, car parking, etc. And we'll endeavour to answer any questions, Chair, but I don't want to go into detail. I'd rather just let members raise their issues and then we'll see if we can answer them.
Councillor Conde.
Just before we start, last time we had a performance report, and it's minuted on page 7 of the minutes of the last meeting, we actually asked for a copy of the risk register to be included rather than just a link to the risk register. Because obviously we can't, as members, click on a link on a piece of paper. And we did actually ask last time, and it was actually minuted, that the risk register be presented to the next panel, and that hasn't been done.
We'll pick that up, Chair. Well, I'll raise that with the performance officer.
Yes, yeah, Councillor, that is obviously a mistake. It should have been reported for this meeting. We'll chase that up. Councillor Evans?
Yeah, thank you. I've just got one brief question to Jonathan. Is it within the Delivering Our Future report that Council adopted a few months ago, there was a target in there, I can't remember the deadline for it, but it said that there would be a Bedworth Town Centre team established. Are you able to just give me a brief update as to where we're at with that?
Yeah, as I understand it, there was a question asked that I came up with the feasibility of the town team for Bedworth Town Centre. Although there was no formal submission from this group, as I understand it, in terms of that. However, what I believe has always been on the table is the option for support for a feasibility study towards a business improvement district. Clearly, at which point, if a business improvement district did want to go forward and the feasibility indicated that there was scope for that, then there would need to be a constituted body to drive that forward, which ultimately needs to be driven by the business community and not by ourselves or what have you. There is work going underway in relation to Bedworth as well, in terms of sort of some groundwork and visioning work, and that's that's very close to being finalised as well. And I think that when we spoke about the town team as well, that one of the things that was suggested there, that is once we've got a body of work that we can sort of use almost as a bit of enticement to encourage people to be involved with some kind of constituted body or formal body, then that might be the time to sort of do that as well.
So if I may, Chair, my understanding from reading the reports at the time was it was going to be a group established by the council, and then when it's all constituted and set up, that's when you hand it over to the...
We can help, I think what you said is that we can help support formulating that and pulling it together, because it's that organisation effectively, if you like, in terms of that, but there's got to be, you know, the will of the businesses obviously to say, well look, yes, we want this kind of body, and this is ultimate, and it's ultimately up to them as well to decide what type of body they want, whether whatever that might be, whether it's a formal town centre partnership, or whether it's, you know, more of a sort of a voluntary group or an action group or whatever that might be. But you know, clearly, if there is that appetite, then we're happy to support that.
Yeah. And also, just honest, are you just open whenever you got some time available over the next few weeks? Can you just send me a briefing report?
Yeah.
With regards to what stage we're at with the independent study that's been...
Yes. Yeah. That's not a problem. I'll get something over to you in relation to that. Okay.
Anybody else in the report? Before I bring Councillor Connor on. I tried to bring councillors in before somebody else was back in. Any other councillor before I bring Councillor Connor back in? Councillor Connor.
Yeah, in the actual detailed report on figures, there's a few things. One, on car parking, we warned at the time about the Pure Gym being an issue in terms of giving free tickets to people who are gym members. And the gym membership, some of them are actually cheaper than actually having an annual season ticket to the car park. So it mentions Pure Gym as being an issue on page 90, or potential issue. Do we have any visibility on that?
I've been obviously sort of digging into this a little to look at the figures and how they sort of pan out. We obviously have a slightly different back office system in the road walk than we do to our other car parks. But effectively what that system shows that there has been a 2% decrease in net income over the first quarter. In fact, I've done the figures to the end of July. But we've seen overall a 2.3% increase in the total tickets issued. That includes discounts and the full price tickets. So you've got effectively this disparity between actually issuing more tickets but a drop in income. The number of discount tickets is increasing, sort of over the year on year sort of increases. I think we've gone from an average about 20% of the total tickets being issued to 25% of the total tickets being issued now being discounted ones. The systems that we have are in terms of issuing concessions. There may be, you know, need to be some work done in relation to how we sort of control and manage that sort of moving forward. I have arranged a meeting with the road walk manager because it does say as part of the contract there as well that they should be helping us in terms of managing and gauging the level of concession tickets that are going through the gym. So I'm meeting with him next week with a view then to meet with the gym themselves to make sure that there's one, we're not open to any opportunities for people to exploit the system, and you know, two, to just sort of give them an indication to see whether or not the figures that we've got in terms of the discounts are actually reflected in the level of gym membership that's actually going on within the gym. So the numbers of discounted tickets are increasing.
And can you give us 24% of the road walk tickets in a year? Is there sort of an idea of how financially large is that? Are we talking a few £1,000, a few tens of thousands of pounds, or are we talking, you know, reasonably large sums of money?
Well, I mean, in terms of the figures for last year, I can only give you an indication of obviously where we are in terms of the performance of the road. We're 3.5% down in revenue for the first quarter against the same quarter last year. We have got an option of, which obviously we will clawing 8% quantity of the discount back, which really relates to us being at full capacity, which realistically is the Saturday, and it applies to Saturday only. So from and that will equate, my initial sort of calculations estimate that that's going to be between £6,000 and £7,000 a year clawback against the concessions.
Anybody else? Okay. The panel is asked to scrutinise the performance and complete this report and make any recommendations. The main recommendation is to try and get that cabinet report to the meeting on the 14th of November. Is that right? So I'm good to leave a vote.
I think that was on the concentration on the...
Yeah. Sorry.
But certainly we'll bring the risk register to the next meeting.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say. Okay, thanks for that. Right, we have the forward plan, and it's for information only. And work programme, I believe we've got a couple of requests. I think it's 154, is that right?
Yes, Chair. You've got reducing in terms of Councillor Darker. Reducing empty homes both in private ownership and household voids.
Yeah, is that fine in favour with the panel? Should we bring that as part of the work programme?
Yes.
I want one everybody else to be councillors, just yourself. You all right with that? Yeah, we'll do that, yeah.
If I may, I did look at the last one of the corporate members, and I think that's quite a good idea going forward. So
There's three items.
I know.
I was going through.
You're going through
each one at a time to get the panels. Of course, another one to come to Condaka about the local tax support scheme. Obviously,
I think we're doing that anyway now.
we're going to be doing that as part of that cabinet report, which is going to come to us on the 14th. Yeah, we'll take that one out. And the last one, Mrs. Ross.
Well, really, Chair, I have nothing very much to add to it, and I'm just probably looking at weaknesses in myself, and I'm quite sure they're, repeated in other committees, and I just feel that it's just something that should be looked at. I mean, 6 years ago, I'm in my 6th year as a co-optee. It's gone very, very quickly, and I mean, we had a morning's training then, in the early stages. And I mean, if we look at council officers, I'm sure they've gone through annual reports and what have you, and scrutiny and so on in HR. And we have really happened. And a few hours coming in, like tonight, the last one was June. The machinations of the council have gone on through the year, and you've done amazing things. But my knowledge is very, very limited. So perhaps you can understand where I'm coming from. I mean, I want to do my best, and I want to be able to contribute and to be able to do what I'm supposed to do, come up and scrutinise the various agendas. And sometimes it's just impossible.
So is there a possibility we can arrange some, sorry, Councillor Evans, go on, you go before.
Thank you very much. Yeah, as I said, I think this is a very good idea. I think co-opted members, they've got experience from outside the council in particular industries or in the community or whatever, who can provide, that scrutiny in committees. I think I think co-opted members are really good on council, but I do think that going forward, I think one of the things that we should be looking at as a council is potentially allowing co-opted members to have a formal seat on cabinet, not necessarily a voting right, but a seat on cabinet. So they have the opportunity every month to come here and see what's actually going on council. And I'd also add as well, that's what happens in North Warwickshire Borough Council, and the opposition also gets seats on the cabinet as well. So that's just one of my views.
I can't understand, Chair, excuse me, I can't understand why co-optees, regardless of who it is, can't sit on cabinet, because, I mean, that's where it all happens. And if you aren't able to, you know, get to sit on there and understand what and how it works, I think you become impotent, you know, really and truthfully. It's, I just find it very frustrating. And I mean, quite seriously, I mean, there's something I was talking about visibility and so on and so on. For example, I'll give an example, which it hasn't come up tonight, and I don't know whether it's relevant tonight or not. But from the 1st of September, the council benefits from sales from developers. Up until now, council did not have to disclose, apparently, how much money they got, or how that money was used within the community. From now on, from the 1st of September, apparently that's all got to change. It's got to be more visible, and we've got to demonstrate, council has got to demonstrate how much money it's got and where it's going, how it's going to be, you know, allocated.
Oh, can you answer that? Do you know the ins and outs of that?
Yes, Chair. There has been a change in the National Planning Policy Guidance, which from the 1st of September is coming in, although I have to say it doesn't actually take effect for us until 2020. Those authorities that have SIL, the Community Infrastructure Levy, will have to report on how they spend the monies that they obtain from this year, but though Section 106 agreements will come into effect from, I think it's the 31st of December 2020, we have to have it done, we have to report by. So it is coming in, and I know Catherine is looking at that, and what it will simply say is how much money you get in, what's it for, where's it come from, and what's it going to be spent on, and it is about transparency. So it sort of alludes a little bit to some of the discussions yesterday about how 106 monies are spent to demonstrate that it is being spent on, you know, in the locality. That's kind of a bit different though, Chair, from the member training or the training that Councillor Ross kind of alluded to, because that's a much broader issue. And that is obviously, that's the kind of thing that members of the Planning Applications Committee would pick up as part of their training with Catherine as members of the committee, rather than as somebody sitting on an overview scrutiny panel. Although, and I say that, I suppose, because there's been a whole raft of changes, and every day there's a change. It would be almost impossible to keep members up to date with absolutely everything that does change. It's hard enough for officers to keep up to speed with some of the changes. So, but it is what it is, Chair. I think in terms of co-opted members, we probably have been a bit remiss in terms of keeping them up to speed with certainly overview and scrutiny. I mean, we haven't actually run any scrutiny training this year for elected members. We would normally have done that, and we usually do that at the start of each municipal year, but of course, no longer having a scrutiny officer means that that's an element of the offer that we no longer do. But certainly we have provided co-opted members with some training, mainly around the sort of governance side. We are proposing to run governance training, corporate governance training, which covers a wider panoply of things in terms of the council and some of the processes that we go through later this year, and I think, well, early part of next year actually, calendar year, and I think we do open that up to co-opted members, but I will make sure that if we do, that those are extended to all co-opted members, give an opportunity to do that. And then I think it may come down to individual co-opted members approaching officers to say if there's a specific area that they feel that they're lacking, then we can look at providing not just them but all members with that training, either internally, in-house, or if there is an opportunity to partner up with other organisations to provide that.
Councillor Elliott.
Thanks, Chair. I have sympathy with you. There's a lot to get your head round, but I think you do excellent scrutiny. You ask some really pertinent questions. As regards the Cabinet, I can't be involved in the Cabinet as an elected member. But members of the public can go, anybody can go and watch the Cabinet anytime.
Yes.
So you are aware.
I do realise that, but it's not quite the same. And I think it should be official.
I am checking, Chair, because I have a sneaking suspicion. I will have to check this. That the legislation prohibits co-opted members from being members of cabinet. I think it has to be an elected member and not the mayor. There's all sorts of various rules. I need to check it, but I think there is. And I say that I am aware because North Warwickshire is not a good example to use because they don't actually have executive arrangements. North Warwickshire is an alternative model. It was too small to have an executive, so it actually operates a hybrid committee system. So it's got more capacity or slightly different rules that apply to it than this council, which obviously does operate under the executive arrangements.
Councillor Nash, well, Nash.
Yes, Cabinet is open, isn't it, to the public, but even as a council, I can't, there are specific Cabinet members, and I can't ask, I can't get involved in Cabinet decision making. I can only look and see and hear. So I think for co-opted members to actually be involved in Cabinet, I would disagree with that.
Councillor Evans.
I do accept Director Richardson's point about the local government structures of North Warwickshire. However, I would give him the example of Coventry City Council, where, again, and you can find a list of members on the Cabinet of Coventry City Council where opposition members actually get to sit on the Cabinet, as well as co-opted members. They don't get voting rights, but they have the opportunity to formally attend, they have the right to formally speak, and it's a bit like the county council as well. Again, we have co-opted members, cabinet members acting up to these committees, for example, and have answering question and answer sessions. And so I think Mrs. Ross actually raises quite a good point, which leads to wider things. So as a result of this, I'd like to move a recommendation that this issue be referred to the Constitutional Review Working Party. So we can have a wider discussion, and I don't know if members of the public or co-opted members can be invited to that working party.
Well, I think if Councillor Ross wanted to observe as a obviously for the chair of the working party to agree, because it is a closed meeting, but if the working party was agreeable to that, then obviously as a co-opted member they can attend those meetings.
Could Mrs. Ross be invited as a witness? As a witness on that item, because I think Mrs. Ross, as well as other co-opted members, can give their views as to how they feel they can add more to the scrutiny function of this council.
Councillor Tandy.
The Constitution Working Party isn't a scrutiny committee, Chair. It's a body that makes recommendations. limitations on the Constitution, as members well know. Unless the situation has changed in all the years I've been at the County Council, I have never known an opposition member sit on the Cabinet. There are 9 Cabinet members at the County Council. It is they who sit together and they who make decisions. It may well be that some opposition members are involved in discussions, but they certainly don't sit as Cabinet members without votes or anything else. I can't speak about Coventry, but I will be extremely interested in hearing the definition that Mr Richardson comes up with about the makeup of the Cabinet.
Yes,
Can
Chair,
we-
I've just got it here. So
Can we do 2 things then? Can we split this up into 2? One, get some extra training that we were talking about, we're talking about, apply to everybody plus the cooperative, right? And then on top of that, this thing about the executive and whether, or the cabinet, whether people can sit on it or not, fill up.
yeah, Chair, and what I will do is I will need to go back to the Local Government Act itself just to check that this actually reflects what the Act says, because that might well determine whether or not it is possible to do this. But the Constitution in Article 7, which is the article that sets out the composition of Cabinet, in paragraph 7.6, it does say only members may be appointed to the Cabinet. There may be no co-optees or deputies or substitutes for Cabinet members. Neither the Mayor nor the Deputy Mayor may be appointed to the Cabinet, and members of the Cabinet, including the Leader, may not be members of an Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Cabinet members will be appointed by the Leader and shall hold office until, and then it goes on. So what I'll need to check is whether that reflects the Act or whether or not that's something that we have done locally. If it's something we've done locally, then of course we could change it to the Constitution Review Working Party and Council can approve that. But I don't recall ever having discussions around this, so my suspicion is that it is in fact the Act itself that does that. Having said that, Chair, and I take the point, some councils do allow members what they call observer status, so that they can observe a meeting as almost, not quite as a participant in terms of making decisions, but that they could be present for discussions and, with the permission of the chair, allowed to contribute to the discussion. But that's obviously a decision that would have to be taken by ultimately council, I suspect, in terms of the constitutional arrangements, because it's council that sets those executive arrangements in place.
Can I just say, sorry, Chair, can I just say, I mean, to me it just smacks of lack of credibility or not to be trusted in some ways, and I just feel I would like it cleared up. I'd like an answer.
I think we'll get an answer. Councillor Condacroft, then Councillor Tankby.
Couple points. One, I'm not allowed to go to the Constitution Working Party either, so it's not the Constitution Working Party is actually one of the least transparent parts of the council. The second point on training, which is where we started, we have a number of new members every second year when obviously there's council elections, and we don't actually get involved enough as existing members or existing co-opted members in actually getting retrained or refreshed sometimes. So I think actually this working group actually looking at what goes into the May 2020 training might be useful in making sure as many people, including co-opteds, get involved and take part in that training, because it makes most sense for actually everyone to be trained at the same time and not but make sure people don't miss the opportunity of that training that comes around every 2 years. And the other thing that the council does is it does now, I believe, for staff a lot of e-training modules, and it has this training package system. I don't know what stuff on there is actually useful for members as well, but if we are doing some training, to actually do it and then actually not record it in some way means that if you get a by-election or whatever, you have to reinvent it. So actually having training resources is quite good, because then at any point, if people want to know about planning or know about housing, and if we've got some training on it, if we've even done a YouTube video of it, Yeah, just actually recording it so people can actually top up or go in. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Tandy?
Basically, Chair, I haven't got much more to add than I said before. Yes, elected members can go along to, as they can to, Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council and ask questions and make any points they want to make at a cabinet meeting, or opposition members can go along to meetings as they can here, Chair, and
So-
contribute.
So what's the panel's recommendations? I have suggested that when Philip was saying about this possible training that's coming up, that any councillors could be involved, plus the co-optees.
Yes, Chair, and we can also...
As an initial step.
We can also bring back to this panel, if it's your wish, a programme. We usually do a programme of induction training for new members after elections, so we can certainly get you to have a look at that as part of that. And you do have a proposal from Councillor Evans that you'll have to consider as well, which was seconded by Councillor Clare.
Do you want me to just repeat that?
Yeah,
For clarity. It's just that as a committee we refer the issue of how we engage with co-opted members, that issue be referred to the Constitutional Review Working Party for further discussion.
I don't find a particular problem with that. Everybody in favour of that?
Yeah.
Yeah? Find everybody in favour? Plus the training, plus the...
Absolutely.
Okay. I haven't any items of any other business or emergency nature or anything else, and just wish everybody a safe journey home. You haven't used that.
You put it on the clock.
It's important to put it on the clock.
Yeah, we'll do.
We'll fill it with-